The relevant anatomy of inferior oblique, which we must know before we proceed with any surgery, is that inferior oblique is a muscle which is not originating from where the rest of the muscles are. It originates from the anterior-inferior angle of the orbit on the orbital plate of maxilla, and then inserts in a fan-shaped manner. Below the inferior rectus, it passes and then goes behind the lateral rectus, approximately getting attached around 9.5 mm behind the lateral rectus, and its posterior end is around 1 to 2 millimeter lateral to the macula. In primary position, it's an extorter with a secondary action of elevation and abduction, primarily because of the angle it is making with the visual axis. The muscle axis is at 51 degrees from the visual axis. So when the globe is adducted about 51 degree, the action is only elevation. It acts purely as an elevator. When the globe is abducted, the action mainly is extorsion. So that is what we keep in mind when we are examining a patient, that you check for the inferior oblique in adduction because of its elevating action, although it is an abductor. Some anatomical considerations before we undergo any surgery. This is the left eye of the patient for descriptive purposes. This is the inferior rectus and this is the lateral rectus on two muscle hooks. And we kind of have to blindly fish for the inferior oblique because it lies somewhere between and behind the tenons in this inferotemporal quadrant. It's a bulky muscle, it's a vascular muscle, primarily because of its neurovascular bundle, which is found at this myoneural junction. It is the structure which is believed to be holding the mid portion of the muscle and act like an ancillary origin, which is important when we are dealing with specially enterization surgeries of the inferior oblique. It is also important that we know that there's a lot of fat which might be encountered while we are dealing with the inferior oblique surgery. We kind of have to make sure that we do not take on the fat in the muscle hook when we are trying to hook the inferior oblique muscle. Complete securing of the inferior oblique should be done, and we should expose the sclera in the form of a triangle when we hook the inferior oblique between the inferior and the lateral rectus. For practically every surgery on the inferior oblique, these steps have to be followed. Now, primarily, we have three surgeries which have been described or have been advocated and made popular of the inferior oblique, including the recession, the myotomy and myectomy, and the anteriorization. Since anteriorization will be covered in subsequent talks, we believe that there are a lot of approaches, and the several approaches that have been described have different opinions on their surgical success. All these approaches have their own risks, have their own benefits, and the decision to choose the process of an inferior oblique surgery is often influenced by patients' clinical examination, coupled by the training and the comfort level of the surgeon, I believe. So when we go back to look at the history of inferior oblique surgeries, since the topic that I have been given, it was originally described in the form of a myotomy from a nasal approach by Bonnet in 1841. Further modifications to the procedures were done, and its indications expanded to treating superior oblique palsy. And then insertional end of the muscle was where the maximum surgeries were being planned, because if you weaken at the insertion end, the more weakening effect was obtained. Finks and Parks are the two people who have described recession of the inferior oblique, and those are the two most popular procedures that have been followed. Later on, myectomy was also described as just being affected, and Gonzalez et al., further supported by works of Delmont and Park, described denervation and extirpation surgery, which, to my opinion, now is not frequently being done. So, myectomy, the shortest approach, you hook the inferior oblique, you cut, and since there are no scleral passes performed in this procedure, so the safety margin is more and there's no risk of perforation. But you don't know where the free edge of the inferior oblique is. It might, in the future, go to an unpredicted location. And often they say that people who advocate the myotomy and myectomy say that inferior oblique surgery is self-titrating. So if you have an inferior oblique overaction, the muscle gets attached to a place where no longer the elevation effect will be shown. Recession surgeries basically involve the same principle as any recti insertion involves. It detaches the inferior oblique from its insertion and reattaches it at a more posterior position. And effect depends on where you have put the muscle fibers. Anterior transposition also involves detaching the muscle and then reattaching it in a more anterior position. The effects of ATIO are individualized as to and graded as to where you put the inferior oblique in relation to the inferior rectus, whether the station is above or below. Now, anterior transposition, just a word because it's a little bit concerned with the anatomy, I'll just put in. It was described quite in centuries back, but then modified by Alan Scott, Apton Call, and then Elliot Nankin, and then further modifications were done. The concept remains the same, that you convert the posterior fibers of the muscle from the depressive action in the primary gaze and make it an anti-elevator. It also limits up gaze to the range of 30 degree. So what you do is you detach the inferior oblique and kind of attach it near a head behind the insertion of the inferior rectus as originally described. But what happened was when you detach the inferior oblique and then attach it, it leads to stretching of this neurovascular junction. So we have to be careful and decisive of where we want to put the inferior oblique and how taut we want to make these fibers. Kushner described this anti-elevation effect, which was seen after this anti-derization surgeries, primarily done quite in the beginning, because it caused a decreased elevation in adduction, especially if done unilaterally, and because of these taut posterior fibers, which are placed temporal and especially anterior to the inferior rectus. So he described this bunching effect of anterior and posterior fibers could eliminate, and also not putting the inferior oblique ahead of the inferior rectus could also deal with this anti-elevation abnormality. Many modifications of anterior transposition have been described where inferior oblique is put parallel to the insertion of inferior rectus, perpendicular to the insertion, which I'm sure sir would be covering in his talk. And all these weakening procedures, including recession, induce slight amount of esotropia, variably reported in different studies to the extent of 5 to 20 prism diopters. But others have also reported that there are no significant changes on the horizontal deviation. It's only the elevation and depression effects that are more prominent. So before considering any surgery on the inferior oblique, it is important that you choose the procedure depending on the primary position hypertropia, on the lateral gaze incompetence, the measurements, and also looking at the torsion effect, which sometimes is ignored when you look at clinical inferior oblique overaction. More temporal and more posterior you put the inferior oblique, it reduces the effect of the recession, and different mechanisms can cause limitations to this elevation after an inferior oblique. We have to make sure that whatever surgery we are choosing, its insertion of the inferior oblique should preferably not be put anterior to the inferior rectus. I personally never put it in anteriorly. The bunching of the posterior fibers to the anterior fibers, about 2 millimeters, what is mostly recommended, and you should not put do a lateral spread of the inferior oblique to avoid this J deformity. Often when we hook the inferior oblique, we kind of cut it or we kind of secure it a little behind its insertion. So sometimes we induce a resection effect. So while we are dealing with recessions or anti-derization procedures, this resection effect should be avoided, and we should try to hook it as near to the insertion as possible. So this is all I have about the inferior oblique anatomical considerations. Since recession is not being described now, sir had to go last moment. I just have one slide to show on the recession effect, that recession surgeries are usually chosen depending on how much effect you want to get. Traditionally, 10 mm, 12 mm, 14 mm recessions have been described. The two most important surgeries that have been described by Park and Fink. Parks include you recess the inferior oblique by putting it 3 mm and 2 mm behind and lateral to the insertion of inferior rectus. And Fink's described it as 6 mm from both the inferior rectus and the lateral rectus insertion at the Fink's point, that is called. So these are the two traditional recession surgeries that have been described, and anteriorization Dr. Pandey will be covering in his next talk. Thank you so much once again.